What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. For today's topic, we are going to be breaking down Kendrick Lamar's halftime show performance at the Super Bowl. So let's get into it. There were a lot of different opinions and thoughts when it came to how people perceived the halftime show performance. There were some people who loved it. There were some people who hated it. There were some people who didn't understand it. But me personally, I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was an absolute work of art, and I was thoroughly impressed with what Kendrick Lamar did on that stage. And I really want to break down some of the things that I noticed and some of the messaging that was trying to be conveyed through the halftime show performance. Now, one of the things that I wanted to tell you all is that I'm actually not a Super Bowl fan. I'm not one of those people who has to go to the store and buy up a whole bunch of food and host a Super Bowl party or go to a Super Bowl party or anything like that. So it actually doesn't really matter to me one way or another. I'll even go further. I am not even a sports fan like that. I don't really like watching football or basketball or anything like that specifically on television. I just find it boring. Even when I was in high school, I didn't really watch that type of stuff. I like to play sports, of course, because I was a wrestler and I also played football, but I was never into watching it because it never really interests me. I'm a nerd. I'm more into that type of stuff. But when it comes to the Super Bowl performance, I definitely had to tune in because I knew that Kendrick Lamar was going to do something interesting, and it delivered. Now, the one thing that I do want to say is that after this performance was finished, the first thing that I did was turn off the TV because I basically didn't care at that point. And to be honest, I think a lot of people felt that same way. A lot of people were more interested in the halftime show performance than they were the Super Bowl itself. And that's not to say that people weren't talking about it, but it's like the performance that Kendrick Lamar did is getting more of a buzz than the actual Super Bowl itself. And even with me, when I actually do tune into the Super Bowl, the only things that I'm really watching are the halftime show performance and then maybe some of the commercials, especially if there's like a trailer for a movie or something like that that I might want to see. The very beginning of this performance had Samuel L. Jackson cosplaying or dressed up as Uncle Sam. For those of you all who do not understand who Uncle Sam is or what he is representing, he is the epitome of white American values. And in this case, upholding white supremacy and everything within it. And obviously we can break this down even further because we can talk about capitalism, government, and all these other areas of activity that they rule over. Uncle Sam's presence presents an interesting dynamic that shows the deceit of white supremacy. In that success in America and being an American citizen is all about freedoms and choices and privileges and all these other things. And these are all things that are untrue for Black folks. We live in a system where our choices and our desire and efforts to actually achieve freedom and privilege are always met with oppression and having roadblocks that prevent us from getting to where we need to get to in this country. Meanwhile, they love to try to portray the deceptive message that everything is achievable for everybody on the same playing field. Uncle Sam represents this type of dynamic. And what having Samuel L. Jackson dressed up as Uncle Sam does is it kind of gives the impression, and I'm putting the tinfoil kufi on. Matter of fact, I'm going to keep that bad boy on throughout this entire video. I think that having Samuel L. Jackson cosplay as Uncle Sam does is it makes it so that it gives the image that there's this one Black person who is successful, and it propagates the image that oppression is not real. Oppression is not the thing that is making Black people be put behind in trying to be successful, and that it's all about pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. So Samuel L. Jackson being in that role represents this idea that we can achieve the American dream as long as we work hard and there's no barriers that stop us. At some point, we see this gigantic panel, which kind of resembles a tic-tac-toe board. And they show these different symbols on this board because at one point we see a triangle, we see a square, we see an X, we see all of these different symbols that are the same symbols that you see on a PlayStation controller. And it's interesting because Samuel L. Jackson at some point says, let's play the great American game. And that's interesting because the whole premise of this is to show how America itself is putting black people through this game that they have to play and they have to navigate. Now, we can look at this in a few different ways. So I'm going to go a couple different angles with it. One of the things that this symbolized to me was a nod at the Squid Games. So for anybody who saw the Squid Games, this was about these different contestants who were doing these life-risking games in order to win money. And they usually were people who were down on their luck, or they got in some debt, or they got through hard times, or whatever the case may be. And they were trying to get a bag. And they were trying to get a bag at the expense of possibly losing their lives. So to some extent, you could say that they were trying to symbolize how America is a game for where black people, because of all the oppression that they face, are playing a game where they could easily lose their lives while trying to become successful. And so in the Squid Games, they had it where they had these contestants who were playing these games and they were wearing these green jogging outfits. And then you had the, I guess, henchmen who were behind the game, and they were wearing these pink suits, and they had different controller symbols on their faces. Like some had squares, some had O's, some had X's, like a PlayStation controller. I also noticed that there was a certain color scheme. Again, these henchmen were wearing pink suits. And the Kendrick Lamar halftime show performance, the people were wearing red, white, and blue. So they had a similar style in the way that they looked, but they weren't pink like they were in the Squid Game. So you could kind of see maybe the parallels between that. Or this could be simply seen as America being a global power that forces black people to navigate a game, while racial oppression and white supremacy are things that hold them back and create obstacles for them outside of the normal challenges that life would present anybody. I'm going to come back to this, but I did want to mention this as well too. There may be some pettiness in this a bit as well, because a lot of this performance wasn't just Kendrick Lamar trying to portray these different allegorical messages about what is happening in America, especially when it comes to black oppression and black empowerment. This also was furthering of the feud and the beef that he has with Drake. So one of the things that came to mind when I saw this is PlayStation is owned by Sony, and Sony also is partnered with Drake's group, which is called OVO. So when I thought about this, I was like, did he specifically use PlayStation controller symbols in order to maybe take a shot at Drake's partnership with Sony? Or was this just simply a thing where he was trying to either portray a Squid Games image, or this idea that America itself was just a global power that was putting black people through the ringer? It's hard to tell, but all these things could obviously be possible. Going back to the statement that I made about the tic-tac-toe board, what I also found interesting was that the Uncle Sam character that Samuel L. Jackson was cosplaying was at the center of this board. And what's interesting about that is in tic-tac-toe, the center of the board is the most powerful position. Most players who choose the center of the tic-tac-toe board either end up drawing in the game or they end up winning. And it's ironic that Uncle Sam would be at the center, as if to say that they are that white supremacy is the most in power, and they have the most potential to be able to win because of the oppressive system that they control. So it was interesting that they placed him there, because one could infer that there was symbolism in the idea that the dominant society in America has the ability to control and oppress other groups of people based off of maldistributing resources. And in this case, specifically, the context is how it impacts black people. That being that Kendrick Lamar is a black man, he's making this performance as if to say that this is him in this experience. The line, "What you want, a house, a car, 40 acres and a mule, a piano, a guitar, anything. My name is Uncle Sam, I'm your dog, motherfucker, you can live at the mall." I found that line to be very interesting. To me, it's a way to expose the condescending attitude and deceit of the dominant society and how they make it seem like we are materialistic, we're beggars for reparations. That's where the 40 acres and a mule part comes in. And also that they are our friends who will give us the things that they promised to give us post the Civil War, but never actually delivered on. It also adds the nuance of the word motherfucker because Samuel L. Jackson is known for saying that, and everybody makes a joke out of it, right? Throughout this performance, there was a trend of Kendrick continuously showing symbols of either his brand or something that he created. The first time that we see this is when there is a scene where he is standing on top of a GNX car, which also symbolizes how there was a GNX car in one of his albums. There's also a point where we see him wearing a chain, and there's a pendant that's on this chain that looks like a lowercase a. Now, there's two different ways we could look at this. One way we could look at this is the idea that this symbolizes the A minor line that he had in Not Like Us when he was talking about Drake. Another way we can look at this is that this is the logo for the PG Lang company. PG Lang is a company that is co-owned by both Kendrick Lamar and Dave Free. And Dave Free was the person who directed the Not Like Us video, or the Not Like Us song in this case. Now, another thing I noticed is that he was wearing a jacket. The jacket was red, white, and blue. So we're going back to that symbolism of American colors. And this is a theme that we continuously see. And the jacket also has the word Gloria on it. And what Gloria symbolizes is a song in his album where he was talking about Gloria, who is his pen. Gloria is the name of his pen. And it symbolizes a love that he had for art and making music. So he wears a jacket that says the word Gloria on it to talk about how this is a piece of his art and the thing that he is creating, and he's showcasing it for the world to see because it represents him. You also see these different people all around him in these different colored outfits like I talked about earlier, some in red, some in white, some in blue. At first you see them kind of scattered, which is supposed to represent some form of cultural divide. Other people could also see this and interpret this as some type of gang affiliation or gang activity because, you know, we see the red, which could represent Bloods, and the blue, which could represent Crips, or at least that's somewhat of a symbol of what or how black people are seen by white America. So we could kind of go back to that theme because there's a point where, you know, we see a lot of them all in a frenzy with these people who are in white as well too. But to me, I think that the people who are in the white temporarily in that moment were representative of white supremacists who are puppeteering these different actions, or this idea that there is this fake idea of black on black crime where there are black people who the typical thing for them to do is to be thugs and to fight amongst one another. There's one particular point where after this big old frenzy, it seems like most of the people fall to the ground, and all the people in the red, they're on the ground. All the people in the blue are on the ground. And most of the people who were in white were on the ground, but there were some that were standing up. To me, this symbolized this idea that white supremacy still controls everything. And in order for them to keep their oppressive system alive, they will sacrifice some of their own so that they can continue to make the system seem like it's not an actual thing. Meanwhile, you see the elimination of all different types of people. So I say all this to say that these are all things that we could conceptualize and we could think are happening, but obviously there were a lot of things that were in this performance that are left up to the interpretation of the individual who was watching it. There are even times where he's performing and you can see like the people in the red that are behind him and the people in the blue who are behind them as well. So it's almost as if there was like a big frenzy, like a fight, and then there was segregation because at some points we saw just the reds and just the blues. So it almost symbolizes this idea that, they went from fighting each other to it being a thing of people are now segregated to it being a thing of red as representing power, which is why they're behind Kendrick, and blue is supposed to symbolize maybe some form of justice, honor, and connection, and that's why we see them at some point behind those in red. So these are things that I guess as Kendrick is performing and he is speaking his mind, these are the things that are empowering him to do what he's doing. And then at some point they all come together and we see them form this American flag. And maybe it's a way to either showcase that this is America, or this is what America is like or has been like, or this idea that it's important for us to create a fair and just society. It's hard to tell what is really meant here, but either one I think is up for debate. I want to go back to Uncle Sam for a minute. It's clear that he also is supposed to represent this buck-broken, finger-wagging old Negro who either made it or is trying to live a life of peace and tells us what we have to do in order to be successful. And when we don't meet that expectation, then we are browbeat, we are chastised, and we are highly criticized. He delivers this message because the dominant society loves for their ideals to go through a black person who is an old broken token. At some point, Uncle Sam comes back and he seems to be unhappy with Kendrick for not following the status quo. And this symbolizes us as black people not falling in line. There's also a part where they form an American flag, but there's a line that's divided right in the middle of this flag. And then Kendrick is standing literally in that gap. And it's interesting how all these people were dressed in these outfits, and all the people who were in the outfits actually were black people. So one could say that this was a symbol of saying that America was built by foundational black Americans, and this is the initiative that we need to take to rebuild the country and to make it better instead of trying to destroy it. And it also, in a way, shows the patriotism that is truly in foundational black Americans. We are the most patriotic people, no matter what anybody says. And we have always had a need to build up the country and care for others. So it shows that the goal and the mission is to still build up America and not tear it down. Because the dominant society likes to make you think that they are the most patriotic, when in actuality, even back in the day, a lot of those Southern Confederates actually were trying to tear America up. So this is something that's very common. As Kendrick continues to do his thing, there's a point where Uncle Sam says that he's going the wrong way. And it's funny because Kendrick was standing at one point on this tic-tac-toe board and he had moved to a different piece of it to show maybe he was moving through different stages or different levels, because you saw this thing that said stage 1 and then you saw this thing that said wrong way, as if to show that Uncle Sam was saying that Kendrick was going about this the wrong way and being authentic, and again, not following the status quo. Now, the other way that we can also look at this too is that there was a point where, he was trying to convey that not going the right way could lead to a loss of a life. That meaning that if black people are bold and upfront with the things that empower them and talking about the truth, that it could result in somebody basically getting rid of them. So there's a point where he even says deduct one life, as to say there's consequences for the actions of standing up against oppression. Now at this point, we can see that Kendrick is moving more into the actual diss of Drake. And he trolled Drake a lot in this performance. So he begins to set up this double whammy where he continues to diss Drake, but he also at the same time makes Drake this symbol of how a cultural appropriator loves to be the individual who takes from the culture, makes profit from it, and never gives back to it. Whereas he is a symbol of trying to portray the messages of those who have their eyes open and those who are on code and those who are culturally aware when it comes to foundational Black American culture. So it's almost as if he's presented somewhat of a polarizing situation where Drake, the cultural appropriator, is on one side and Kendrick Lamar, the culturally aware brother, is on the other side. Another point, he has Drake's exes up on stage because he has SZA on there, who Drake dated in 2009, and then he has Serena Williams, who he dated in 2011. And the Serena Williams piece was the real deal because there were a lot of different messages. It was almost to the point where these different images and things that they were showing through Serena Williams were compounding. There were things that they were almost trying to portray through Serena Williams in her story and not just what was going on with Kendrick Lamar and his beef with Drake. So one of the things that we need to talk about is the fact that, again, Serena Williams dated Drake and it didn't end well from what I understand. Another thing that I found interesting was the whole dynamic of Serena Williams throughout this performance. Although she was born in Saginaw, Michigan, she grew up in Compton, California. So you can now see the connection between her doing the Crip Walk on stage and being from Compton, California. I also found it interesting that despite her being Drake's ex and not ending well, him dissing her white husband and all this other stuff, there also was another layer to this as well too. In 2012, she did a dance, which I believe was the Crip Walk, at the Olympics, and she was criticized by the dominant society for this action. It's almost as if the dominant society was trying to say that she can't be a Black woman who has a personality and reps where she's from. She has to just be the negress who is able to play tennis and is able to perform to entertain white people, because let's be real, those are the main individuals who are actually interested in tennis in the first place. So with this performance, her Crip walking on stage with Drake's nemesis, Drake being her ex, and also remembering what happened in 2012 with the Olympics, she literally looked at both Drake and the dominant society, turned around, tooted her big ol' ass at them, and told them both to kiss it. To me, this was like watching the Keke Palmer troll stunt, except it was better. It was actually funny. It was deeper. It had a better message. It actually had substance. And it wasn't some low-key shea butter samba nonsense. At the end of this performance, Kendrick brought up the 40 acres and a mule line and how this is bigger than music. They tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence. It's a nod to the idea that the dominant society created white supremacy so that we would not prevail. And here we are still fighting. And here we are still showing how resilient we are as people. The music is simply entertainment and it's escapism. But when someone like him is creating a lesson, it's all about cultural awareness. The whole idea was to present Kendrick Lamar as a player of a game, and the big boss was the white supremacist within entertainment and the industry, and ultimately as a whole. And Kendrick Lamar is showing how he continues to persevere. Ultimately, this was phenomenal because I love the artistic talent and messages. And it made me almost question whether or not this was somewhat of a piece of propaganda, or was this a nod to the idea that Kendrick Lamar himself has been paying attention to the grassroots, to us pro-blacks, to all of us who are on code. It was very hard to decipher at this moment, and I guess only time will tell what Kendrick does post this performance and what ends up developing as a result. But either way, I was highly impressed by what I saw that day, and anybody who has criticism towards it is somebody who is just so blinded and is so caught up and wrapped up in being entertained, escaping, and what is going on with celebrities and drama, that they're missing the important messages that are being conveyed through art. All right, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come in the future. In the meantime, I would love it if you liked, commented, subscribed, shared, and hit the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.